Hello and welcome back. Here on our channel, we're trying to get you to understand how easy it is to build a website on Joomla 4 using SP Page Builder. Maybe you're an amateur web designer. You do it as a little side hustle. Maybe you've never designed a website before and you're trying to come up with something new to learn how to do. Or maybe you're a web developer professional who is looking for another tool to put in your arsenal. And we believe that SP Page Builder combined with Joomla 4 is exactly that. It will help you build professional, powerful, creative websites for you to use in your business or for your own personal use. Today we're going to look at the text box. Actually, we're going to look at the general settings of the text box. Text boxes are probably the single most thing you'll use in SP Page Builder and pretty much on any website. So we figured we would start with the basics. So let's get going and look at the general settings of the text box. Okay, so here we are in our administrator login to our website. And once again, we're going to log in. And once we're logged in, we're going to go over to Components, SP Page Builder, Pages. And this time, when we go to the home page, we're going to click on Front End Editor. Now, sometimes when you click on that, it may require you to log in again before it lets you get to the page. Just use your administrator username and password, and everything will be get you right in, and you'll be able to start editing your page. So this is what we created the last time in our tutorial video. But you may have noticed that our template is different. In the first video, I was using the standard template that came with Joomla 4 called Cassiopeia or Cassiopeia. I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, but whichever you prefer is fine by me. I downloaded and installed the Helix Ultimate template from Joom Shaper, who is also the company that creates SP Page Builder. I just think you have a lot of flexibility and a lot more power when you're using a template from Joom Shaper along with SP Page Builder. Not a requirement. I just like how they interact a little better. Now, if you remember last time, we created this panel with all these boxes inside the row, and we changed the background color. And just for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to change some of these back to the settings. So if I come in here and you see we still have all this, we're going to basically change this to a 12 plus 6 plus 6 and say generate. And now we just have 3 boxes, a text box here and 2 empty boxes here. The other thing I want to do is come back into here and come into the styling and just put no background on it. And you'll notice everything disappear because our text in our text box is currently set to white. And although we're going to look at this in the next session, we're going to jump into changing the text color here in a second. But when you change something, always make sure you save it. And you see it says successfully saved. And then we're going to go back into our text box, which is right here. Click on the little pencil. And we're sitting here with our text box with the text that's in it. But like I said, it's white. So we're going to go into styling here real quick. And we're going to change the text color to black. And lo and behold, there's our text. Save it. And let's get over to the general settings tab. So if you remember last time, we set an admin label of our first text block that you don't really see in this view. Isn't really necessary, but suppose we wanted our first text block to actually be a title on this page, or on this section, I should say. We can just take the our first text block and we can copy it and we can put it in here, paste. And there we go. So it now has a legible title set up here. And you notice when we put our title in here, some new settings have shown up. The first thing is, what kind of an element do we want our title to be? So if we change it to an H1, you'll notice it gets bigger. You can change it to an H2, it gets a little smaller. Change it to an H3, gets a little smaller, so forth and so on, all the way down to a div, a P, or an H6. Typically, just for SEO purposes, I try to make all of my text headings, when they are there, to be an H1 or H2. For the sake of this tutorial, we're going to make it an H1. The next thing you notice is you can actually change the setting of the title font size here by device. You can either use this slider, which is a little hard, or you can just put your numbers in here, 50, if you want to make it a 50-point text block on a PC. And then you also get to set the text line height, which I usually keep matched. But if you don't, if you make it bigger, you'll notice there'll be more space top and bottom. You can make it smaller top and bottom, but I typically keep them 1-to-1. So we're going to change this here to a 50. A 50. And now we have our text block. You can also change this font size per device. So if you click on the tablet icon, you'll notice it goes to a tablet width, and you say, it's a little big for a tablet. So let's bring this down to, let's say, we're going to come down to let's look at what 40 looks like. 40 looks pretty good on a tablet, so we'll leave it at 40. And we'll also make this set at 40 as well. And then once again, we can come down here to our phone, and it's pulling the 40 from here, and it's really large here. So what we want to do is probably pull this down to in the 20s, maybe 20. That's a little small there. We'll leave it at 30, and then again make this a 30. So now on all three devices, you can either, anytime you change them here, they'll also change here. If you want to see your devices, you'll get to see the layout of your text box per device. The next section down, you can do some formatting on the text of the title. Like you can put an underline on it, you can italicize it, or you can make it all caps. Now notice that there are no devices here, so if you make it italics, it will be italics on all three. And then let's turn off the italics, and then you get to choose the different font weights. So we're on medium, we can make it black. Any of these font weights should work based on the font that you have selected. Now the font that's selected is a default font in the template, which you can also change. We'll probably do a little series on the template settings of Helix Ultimate, but that'll be in the future. But the nice thing to know right now is that, and I skipped over it, you can change the font of your title. We could change it to anything we like. These are all free Google fonts. If you don't necessarily, if you know which font you'd like to look, let's suppose you want to look at Lobster, and you switch over to Lobster, and there we have our text in Lobster. Once again, we can change the font size and the line height size. Let's look at it formats pretty well. And then there aren't that many different font weights for the Lobster font. So if you just choose default, it'll go to the default one. Line spacing is great. I'm sorry, not line spacing. Letter spacing is great because sometimes when you get, specialty fonts like this, I'm going to change this just to show what I mean. Sometimes you get all this spacing in between. They're really meant to look like they connect. So you can change your font spacing, your letter spacing, I should say, into anything until it looks exactly like, look, you can see here, it misses a little bit here in the E and the X. Typically if you go default, which is 0, they'll line up perfectly. Sometimes you have to make them a little tighter. But the nice thing is, suppose we weren't on one of a font like this and we were on, say, something like, I don't know, we'll come all the way up to the top to like Arial, okay? And, some of the cool design things you can do with letter spacing is you can really space them out to kind of give that wide open, airy feeling between your fonts. And sometimes when you do something like this, it looks better to make them all caps. But for now, we're going to turn this back off. We're going to change our font back to Lobster. Start typing in, it'll show up. There's Lobster, and obviously they're spaced too far apart. So we will come back here and change it to default. The next thing on the way down is the title color. By default, it's set to black, but we can make it red. We can bring our slider over into the blues and pull our blues, or if you prefer, and you'll see me do this a lot, you can actually enter your hex number in here. Like I know that blue will be 0000FF, and you should go, whoop, what did I do? I think I have one too many zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There we go, a true blue font. And now we have a blue title with black lettering, and everything looks great. The other nice thing you can do is, as you see, our title is right smack up against the top of our text box. So you can adjust within the text box itself. You see the space that's in there. If you hover over, you can see where you are. But this is the space that you've created by making this 59. And you can go all the way down to 0, and you'll see it's right back up. The other thing, and I use this one more than I use the top, is suppose you want a little more spacing in here than you currently have. We can come down here and make it, whoop, I lost my mouse there, sorry. Like about a 10 or, right around 10 looks good. So we can change this to 10. Now, one thing you should know is if you make a setting like this and don't set anything in here or here, it will take the setting that it reads from whatever is plugged in. So if you notice we have a 10 here, it will be a 10 there, and it will be 10 pixels between all three of them because we have a 10 set up in here. If you want smaller space in here on the phone, all you have to do is enter a 5, and then it's a smaller space on the phone than it is on the computer or the desktop. So we've spent all this time, and all we've talked about is the titling of our text box. Coming down further, we actually have our text itself, which is just some lorem ipsum thrown in there. But there are some settings you can do in here as well. Like you can change the font size to, I'm sorry, before you do that, if you want to change it, you do need to select it. Come into here and say, make this 18 PT, 18 points, or 8 point, which is really, really small. But we're not going to play with it here because there's a better place to set those. But if you want to do some cool things, like you want to center align everything, or left align everything, or full justify everything, it works really, really well. We're going to leave everything left align. We can, if we were in here, we had, let's come into here and say, we're going to do set a new line and go, this is line 1. This is line 2. And this is line 3. Some of the things we can do in here, and by the way, you can move this out. I'm sorry. You can pull this out so you can see a little bit more. If we take these 3 lines we just created and we highlight them, we can come into here and say make them bullet points. Now these are not all bullet point because when I did it, I did not shift return it. I'm sorry, I did not return it, I shift returned it. Come to here, and once again, and there we have our bullets, or we can take these 3 again and change it into a list box with numbers, a list box with letters, Roman numerals, whatever we would like to do. We have all that. You can create right here a hyperlink to an external window or to something currently within your page. Just put the URL in here, put the title you wanted to see, but if you don't put a title, it's just going to take the line that is currently there. You can put an image in here as well. Sometimes that's harder to control where it lands. There are other ways to utilize images in SP Page Builder. And of course, you can always go back and look at the code of the page. And if you know anything about CSS HTML, this will all look very familiar to you. You'll see we have a div. Its font size is 0.8 in a span. If I take this here and I delete this and then come down here and get rid of this div as well, you'll notice that our font size is back to normal. And I did that because we're going to look at that a little bit more in the future. But right now, we want to just undo all of this and then come down to our next setting. Well, first off, let's come into here and say we're going to make this a paragraph instead of a div. Now it's a P block. If we come into here, you'll notice it's a paragraph block instead of a div. That's the better way to handle text on a website. Or roll this up. Content alignment. Now here's something really interesting. So suppose you want everything centered. Okay, so here is it centered our title and also centered our text in the P box, not this. The ULs will always stay left aligned. But suppose you want your title centered, but you want your text left aligned. Well, here's a really cool thing about SP Page Builder is with it left at centered, which will keep our title centered, we can come here and select this entire thing here and say align this left. Now our text is aligned left, but our title stays centered. No coding, just telling the page builder what you want it to do. Once again, we have all the Google font choices. One of the fonts I'm really loving lately is one called Poppins. I think it's a nice, clean, modern-looking font. And then once again, you can control your font size here per device. So suppose we want it on a computer to be 22, on a tablet to be 20, and on a phone to be 18. And then we come down here and on the computer, 22. That's a little small. So let's go 26. So we'll make it 4 bigger than the font size. This was 20, so this will be 24 because that's 4 bigger than this font size. And then we go over to here. This is 18. 4 bigger than this is 22. And there we go. We have a responsive text box that will look good on every device, no coding. Once again, you can take everything in here and can you change the font family, but you can also change the weight. This time they're in numbers instead of the font weight numbers, as opposed to thin, light, regular, medium. These are numbers that are a little more specific. The last thing on the general tab of the text box is a drop cap. In order for drop cap to work, your text needs to be inside of a span. And the way you can check that out is come back up here to these three dots, come and look at your code, and you'll notice that we have nothing there. But if you come into here and you click here and you grab all this text, you'll notice it says there's nothing there. It thinks it wants to be in a paragraph. But we're going to come up here, and I know you know we're not talking about coding too well, but we're going to put this in a span tag. So it starts with an open bracket span. Fingers are not working well right now. And then whatever we open, we have to close with a / within the bracket. So you go open bracket / SPAN. And just a little tutorial here. You know, this is an open span. This is a self-closing BR, which is a break or a new line. And then you have an open UL and a closed UL, which is an unorganized list, which gives you the dots that you can kind of see back here. And then every LI, which is a list item, opens with the list item, closes with the list item, opens with the list item, closes with the list item. And there's a span in here, just, you know, setting all the sizes of everything and aligning them left. And so we can save here. And now that we are in a span, we should be able to come down here and go drop cap, and there's our drop cap that shows here. We can change the size of the drop cap, and we can also change the color of the drop cap as well to anything we would like it to be. That's something you can see there, but you don't necessarily have to use a drop cap. So that is basically all the settings. What I do want to tell you is a couple things here real quick. Once again, anytime you click on one of the devices, you can see what your anything you put in SP Page Builder, but what your text is going to look like on all three items. And then a couple things I didn't go over. You'll notice there's little question marks here next to a lot of the things. If you click on that, it'll give you a little hint as to what all they are. This is enable your desired text to use as the add-on title. Leave it blank if no title is needed. So if you're not quite sure what any of these are, there are little help guides in here. We saw the menu on, I'm sorry. And, you know, that should get you through building your first text box. One last thing that's on the general tab is this CSS class. If you have a cascading style sheet or a CSS file that you want to specifically address something anywhere on in this text box, you can simply add the name of it in here, which would be, you know, my CSS styling. Styling. You would need somewhere in a CSS sheet a class that's called my CSS styling, or whatever that class tells it to do. It will affect this area of your, or any area of your text box for that matter. However, in our next section, you're going to see that there's actually a way to do CSS styling right within this text box. So hope you had fun. I love building pages with SP Page Builder. If you found this tutorial helpful, you know, please give us a thumbs up, please like it. please become a subscriber of our page. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them down below and we will get back to them.